This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for content creators and business owners to create their own beautiful websites. Battlestar Galactica came out at an interesting time in television. Today, viewers expect there to be a continuous story playing out over multiple seasons like a television novel. When Battlestar Galactica came out, however, there was still the idea that a show needed to hook in new viewers who may be channel surfing or checking out a one-off episode. To this end, each episode of Battlestar Galactica begins with an intro explaining the general status quo of the series, capping things off with an insistence that the antagonists of the show, the Cylons, have a plan. This phrase has become incredibly ironic to some viewers who even today express dissatisfaction over the show's final season and ending. A common complaint which is often raised is that it became incredibly obvious that producers David Icke and Ronald D Moore were seemingly making things up as they went along, and that unlike the Cylons, the writers did not have a plan. I've always found this criticism quite interesting because it implies that if Icke and Moore did go into the series with a detailed plan, it would have improved the show immensely. However, this is a claim I'd like to interrogate because it's an idea I've seen bandied about a lot in online film and TV discourse. There are some people who flat out say that a writer shouldn't even start writing the first page until they have everything mapped out in advance. In this case, the most apt point of comparison to Battlestar Galactica is the space opera epic Babylon 5. Fans of Babylon 5 often sing the praises of its creator J. Michael Straczynski for supposedly having all 5 seasons planned out in advance. But I think it's worth looking at the creative processes behind both of these shows to see if having a plan in advance really helped Babylon 5 as much as the apparent absence of a plan apparently hurt Battlestar Galactica. Moderate spoilers for both of these shows, by the way. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. For any aspiring content creators or business owners, Squarespace is the best way to carve out a space of your own online. Whether you're just starting out or managing an existing brand, Squarespace provides everything you need to create a beautiful website to engage with your audience, sell products, host content, and much more. With Squarespace, you don't need to be an expert at writing code. Simply select from dozens of pre-made flexible templates. Once you've found one to your liking, Squarespace's Fluid engine allows you to customize your site as much or as little as you want, using images and videos from your own asset library. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code Rowan J. Coleman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here. And now, on with the video. First of all, both shows are very different at a conceptual level. What I mean by that is, while Babylon 5 set out to explicitly be a television novel, telling one large story with a proper beginning, middle, and end, this wasn't the case for Battlestar Galactica. Due to the original show's cancellation and Galactica 1980 being largely disregarded, there was no ending in mind for Battlestar Galactica in the first place. No one knew exactly how long the show would last. It could be a handful of miniseries or TV movies, or it might go for 7 seasons like The Next Generation did. It's worth keeping this in mind when making a statement like, Battlestar Galactica ended badly because the writers had no plan, because it implies that the writers were expected to have a plan from the start. However, that's actually extremely rare in TV writing. J. Michael Straczynski created Babylon 5 with the specific intention of telling the story of the rise and fall of empires. A concept like this logically requires some kind of big event to happen to tell this story. What could lead to the rise and fall of empires? War. What would make this particular war stand out? It would have to be something all-encompassing against an incredibly powerful enemy. You can see how a story arc like the Shadow War would naturally emerge from this base concept. In Battlestar Galactica, however, that's not the case. BSG is a show in motion. The fleet is always on the move. Unlike Star Trek before it, this kind of status quo naturally lends itself to more episodic storytelling. There's the overall goal of finding Earth, but that goal doesn't immediately conjure up an arc with a defined beginning, middle, and end like the Shadow War does in Babylon 5. Because of this, Ronald D Moore and executive producer David Icke only ever planned out Battlestar Galactica 10 episodes at a time. But that doesn't mean they just came up with whatever off the top of their heads. There were 2 mechanisms they used to steer the ship. The first was the series Bible. While Babylon 5 may have had a map, Battlestar Galactica still had a compass. Moore had a crystal clear picture of what BSG was and what it wasn't, which kept the writing team focused in terms of possible directions to take the show in. The second mechanism is what I like to call the yes and approach to storytelling. This is actually a common thing among thriller writers who sometimes deliberately write themselves into corners just to see if they can get out of it.
I started typing and I got 10 pages in and going, oh my god, he's dead.
Sonia's dead.
She's dead. What's going on here? And you go, well, you better work it out because you're getting paid to do it.
Do you ever find that you've painted yourself into a corner?
Oh, yeah. But I love... Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's a multiple split personality in a really healthy occupational way where you're going, oh, you think I can't get out of this one? I think I can't. And I have to talk to myself like that all the time going, yeah, bet you can't. And it is professional petulance. And I love proving that I can when the odds are against me.
A great example of how this affected the writing in Battlestar Galactica concerns the character Carl Hilo Agathon. The character was only supposed to appear in the miniseries, being assumed dead when the series proper began. But as it turns out, the cast, crew and network executives all really liked Tamo Pinniket, so they decided to keep him on for season 1. However, this raised several issues. If you're at all familiar with script writing, I assume you've seen the Matt Stone Trey Parker lecture on good plotting.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're f***ed, basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but."
This is something Ronald D Moore, knowingly or not, was aware of when constructing the storyline following Agathon on Cylon-occupied Caprica. If Moore had stuck to the original plan, Agathon would have died off screen. But by coupling yes and with but therefore, we end up with something pretty interesting. Keep Agathon alive, yes, and we have a new story thread following him on Cylon-occupied Caprica. But all the cities on Caprica were nuked, and if we have to depict bombed out city ruins every other week, the visual effects budget will end up spiraling out of control. Therefore, if we want to shoot in Vancouver as it is, doesn't that mean the Cylons deliberately left some cities standing and cleared away all the bodies? Yes, and they did that because the Cylons didn't just want to wipe out the colonies, they wanted to colonize the planets themselves. Okay, so we have Agathon on the run from the Cylons. What if he gets captured? Yes, and what if he's rescued by Sharon? Yes, but by this point the viewers know Sharon is a Cylon, therefore this must be part of some Cylon plan. They definitely seem to be growing closer because of all of this. Is that part of the Cylon plan too? Yes, and that plan is about Cylon reproduction, therefore the Cylons can't currently reproduce on their own. But they want to? Yes, and we end up with the entire overarching story of Battlestar Galactica. Because Moore decided to break with the original plan to kill off Agathon, there is a straight line from the storyline this decision created to the very final episode. It's actually remarkable how many plot lines, story beats, and character arcs would have changed if Agathon stayed dead like he was supposed to. Now you'll notice one of the beats I mentioned in that example wasn't anything to do with the actual story, but was a practical consideration of the visual effects budget. This is another reason why strict adherence to a plan as opposed to improvisational writing can seriously damage a TV series. And no one knows this better than, ironically enough, J. Michael Straczynski. In The Complete Book of Script Writing by Straczynski himself, he quotes the old military saying, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." As I said earlier, there's this perception from a lot of Babylon 5 fans that JMS had the whole 5-season arc of Babylon 5 planned way ahead of time. While this is true to some degree, those plans changed drastically as the show went on. In the Babylon 5 script book number 15, JMS actually included an outline of his plan for the show, which he made between The Gathering and Season 1. I'll put a link below to where you can read a summary of it, but suffice to say, it's very different to the show we ended up getting. A big change fans know is obviously the departure of Michael O'Hare's Commander Sinclair, replaced by Bruce Boxleitner's Captain Sheridan. It's easy to assume Sheridan simply adopted the original arc intended for Sinclair, but the differences between the actual show and the original outline go way beyond that. Straczynski's vision for Babylon 5 was certainly pioneering in terms of storytelling, but JMS was also a pragmatist when it came to the making of the show. The whole idea of setting a series aboard a space station using CG effects and remote music production came out of budgetary concerns. Going back to the old saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy, in the TV world that enemy is time and money. It's certainly true that Straczynski didn't approach Babylon 5 in exactly the same way as Ronald D Moore did with Battlestar Galactica, but to say the Babylon 5 we got is the result of JMS sticking to his pre-created plan simply isn't true. Which I suppose brings me to the ultimate takeaway from this video. When it comes to writing or the creative process in general, very rarely is there a definitive right way of doing things. I am generalizing with the title of this video in saying that writers don't need a plan because I know some of them do. For some writers, sitting down and typing up the screenplay is the payoff to the hard work they've done outlining their story. But for plenty of other writers, they find the story through writing.
Starting without a story outline can really hurt you.
It's like eating a dessert and missing the main meal.
But then that's just our experience. So there are writers who can do it, who sit down and sort of enjoy, and I'll find out where I'm going. The bastards, we call them, talented bastards.
I sort of work it out in my head, but not in order. So I haven't got scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5, and on paper at all. I've just got all these notions, some of which are weak and some of which are strong, and then as you're writing, and there's suddenly a weak one can become strong and a strong one can become weak, and you just follow it. It's like surfing it almost.
Kind of taking a leap, but not knowing where you're going to land it's a really respectable way to write.
I think it's worth remembering that writing advice is just that, advice. There are many self-proclaimed gurus who will insist on one specific method being the correct one. I know of entire writing courses which literally only teach Joseph Campbell's hero's journey or Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I am by no means positioning myself as any kind of writing guru in making this video, but I can tell you from personal experience as someone who has been paid to write fiction and has written fiction in the hopes of getting paid, that the creative process is more than ticking some boxes. In fact, that's why I made a short-lived series of videos on this very topic several years ago, because the different ways people approach writing is fascinating to me. Speaking for myself, I think my own process is definitely closer to Straczynski than it is to Moore, but they are both incredible talents and what they do works for them. I don't think there's a single writing hack or writing formula which everyone can use to write great stories without fail, but I've always liked how Nicholas Meyer described his process. Not only do I think it's useful as writing advice, but I also think it's applicable to the process of learning how to improve as a writer. He likened writing a script to taking a car journey. It's good to know where to begin and where to end, but if you map out every single leg of your journey in advance and never deviate, you could miss some pretty amazing sights. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and make sure to hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all of my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my Patreon or YouTube members using the links down below. There you can see videos early as well as some exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.